Sabelo has sent his regards. He couldn't join us today because of prior commitments, but we'll play his warm greetings for all of us to hear. And we also have Dr. Tabani Moyo, the regional director of MISA Zimbabwe, and we also have representatives from the Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission. So I would like to acknowledge all of you for your presence today. And I also want to acknowledge all our panelists joining us for the later segments, our institutional respondents, and every participant here who has committed their time to listen to this and help us launch this report. The purpose of today is that we have been compiling reports throughout SADC, election-based, and this one is for Zimbabwe. And over the next 2 hours, we will be examining the critical findings on the access to information during the Zimbabwe's electoral cycle, specifically the legal framework, the patterns of non-disclosure, and the impact on civic education and accountability. You will hear a presentation from Admire Mare, followed by a response, 2 panel discussions, and an interactive session, and finally, we'll have a call to action. We aim to leave here not just with insights, but with concrete reform priorities and institutional commitments. And to give us a warm welcome and opening remarks, I invite Ivy Gikonyo. Ivy, the floor is yours. You can unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you, Belinda, for that. And welcome, everyone. So, once again, good morning. Thank you so much for being here. It's truly, truly a pleasure to be able to gather as we have here. It's a space where we have, I see colleagues, I see partners, I see people from academia and friends as well. So that the common thread here is that we are all people who care about democracy and understand that information plays a very critical role in sustaining this democracy that we care about and accountability that goes hand in hand with democracy. So, thank you very much for taking the time to join us. As Belinda has mentioned, the report that we are talking about today assesses the extent of Zimbabwe's compliance with the guidelines on access to information and elections in Africa. So here we believe that access to information is critical to democracy, and that without it, we will have democracy existing only in form but not in substance. Because elections is not just going to the ballot and electing the person that you want to vote, but elections, there's that long lead up to it. So there are a lot of conversations that happen during elections. There are many ideas that are clashing, that come up. There's just putting these leaders to scrutiny, and then there's the issue of these people who are making the decision to vote, making decisions that are informed. Are they making the right decision for their own futures? So, for elections to be meaningful, we need information to flow freely. They need, if it's institutions, for them to be transparent, if it's journalists, for them to be able to access the information that they need to. And so these are some of the conversations that we will be delving into a little bit more. But the guidelines that we're looking at today, they give us a very comprehensive framework. They are meant to ensure that access to information is present in every at every election stage. So it's also there to ensure that there is no misinformation. And in essence, just to remind us, these guidelines, they remind us that elections, it doesn't just matter that you follow the procedure, that the results are out, but that the information ecosystem was one that could hold up, itself, that was one that we could say had integrity. So, as first of all, a sincere appreciation to the Special Rapporteur on freedom of expression and access to information in Africa, whose mandate we have the privilege, the distinct privilege of supporting. So she has been there at every stage of this report writing. She has given us her guidance. She has been open. We've had her support, and we're thankful. So I acknowledge everyone in the room, those joining us from within the center, without and outside the center, and those from Zimbabwe and across many borders. You are most welcome. And in a special way, yeah, just to thank also Prof. Admire, who we'll hear from later on, and our partner who has been very critical to this, MISA. Thank you for being here, and to all, looking forward to these conversations. And this was just to now for me, it's now to welcome Dr. Gumedze to now give us the official welcome. And following that, we will hear from the rest. So thank you once again for being here with us. Thank you, Belinda.
Distinguished colleagues, partners, and participants, good morning. It is my pleasure to welcome you to this very important webinar marking the launch of the Zimbabwe Elections Report on proactive disclosure of information during elections. I bring you warm greetings from the Center for Human Rights at the University of Pretoria, where I serve as the Assistant Director.
I'm not sure it is
This
from my
year is
side, but
particularly significant for
it
us
is not working. The audio is not
as the
working.
center proudly celebrates 40 years since its establishment in 1986. Over these 4 decades, the center has remained committed to advancing human rights, strengthening democratic governance, and supporting accountability across the African continent. Today's engagement reflects that enduring mission. We are especially pleased to convene this event in collaboration with MISA Zimbabwe, bringing together voices from the academia, civil society, the media, and public institutions. The report we launch today comes at a critical time as questions of access to information, electoral transparency, and digital governance continue to shape the integrity of elections across Africa. The findings of the Zimbabwe's 23rd August 2023 harmonized elections highlight both progress and significant gaps, particularly in proactive disclosure, equitable media access, and the management of digital information ecosystems. These are not just issues unique to Zimbabwe, they resonate across many of our electoral contexts on the continent. The webinar, therefore, provides a valuable platform not only to reflect on the Zimbabwean experience, but also to deepen our collective understanding on how we can strengthen compliance with regional standards, including the guidelines on access to information and elections in Africa, and safeguard democratic integrity in an increasingly digital age. We do look forward to a rich evidence-based, solution-oriented discussion. I wish to thank you for your attention.
Those were our remarks from Dr. Sabelo. I just want to confirm if everyone else was hearing that. Was it audible? Because I think Enoch said it wasn't audible on his side.
I think it was just we needed to increase the volume, which
Okay.
I hope everyone else was able to do the same. Yeah.
Okay, moving along, I would like to introduce our partner from MISA, Dr. Tabani Moyo, to give brief remarks from their side on behalf of MISA.
Uh, Thank you very much for this partnership to begin with, Belinda and the team, Ivy and Tim and Sabelo. At MISA, we put at the center of our existence collaboration and solidarity as part of our flagships, in the belief that together we can go further than faster alone. On the subject matter pertaining to the issue of media freedom and elections, I shall shun to preempt our keynote speaker on the key issues that will be emerging from the engagements, but to broadly highlight the critical and strategic importance of media freedom, freedom of expression, access to information, right to privacy, as cornerstone rights that also stimulate or anchor the enjoyment of the rest of the rights that human beings are born with, inalienable rights that exist by the mere fact that we are human. And to us, this is critical, and these are the key indicators within any election that we ought to understand whether they are being realized. Media as a message towards the enjoyment of access to information, freedom of expression, right to privacy. And to us, it is critical to highlight that the report, the process of engaging in the report, the process of engaging in the election process was mainly that of seeing to it that Zimbabwe, like any other League of Nations, is upholding these fundamental rights that allows for a people to make choices that are informed as to who and how they are governed. Paradoxically, this is coming at a time, speaking of elections, when Zimbabwe is actually in the process of mooting a waiver towards the enjoyment of that same right by the citizens of the country through constitutional amendment number 3. So this is quite instructive, but beyond being instructive, how is it going to also equally inform the national processes as they unfold? How then do they feed into regional and continental engagements around the strategic necessity of electoral processes that are of high integrity because they allow for the foundational rights of expression, access to information, and media freedom to be adhered to and to be respected. In a nutshell, this is our humble way of underscoring the strategic importance of this partnership. I surely welcome you to those who are joining us from within Zimbabwe, those who are joining us from the continent of Africa, and those joining us from beyond. Please feel free and feel at home. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tabani Moyo, for the humble remarks. And it is such a vital discussion considering what is happening in Zimbabwe right now. Without as well preempting what Prof. Admayamari is going to touch on, I think it's his time, it's his moment. Welcome, Prof. Admayamari, and may you please give us the brief synopsis of the report to everyone. He's the one who compiled the report, and we welcome his input on this. Prof. Murray?
I think you need to add him to panelists rather than being an attendee.
I think he is added. Let me just confirm.
is in the list of attendees who do not have a mic.
Okay, let me move him. Okay. Hi, Prof. Are you able to speak now?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Awesome.
Sorry
Thank
about
you.
that.
Thank you. I was wondering what was going to happen because I constantly looked at the and was wondering whether I was going to be a speaker or I was just going to be an attendee. But thanks, Dr. Moyo, for letting Belinda that I was an attendee. Thank you so much. Nonetheless, good morning, everyone, and I hope you're well. Because of my time, I don't think I will be able to acknowledge everyone, but just to say thank you to the Center for Human Rights at the University of Pretoria. Thank you to MISA. And also thank you to everybody who has managed to take time from their busy schedules to be part of this particular convening, which certainly is going to discuss issues to do with the proactive disclosure of information during the last elections in Zimbabwe. I am the one who compiled the report, as Belinda has already pointed out. So I don't think I need to say a lot around myself, but just to say that I hope, can I share the slides? I don't know if I can share. I just want to know. Can I? Oh, yeah, I think I can, because I've got a couple of slides that I just wanted us to go through, and then I should be able to allow for conversation. All right. I hope you can see. So pretty much the title of this particular report, as you already see from the report that was shared, is the proactive disclosure of information during elections and evaluation of Zimbabwe's compliance with the guidelines on access to information and elections in Africa during the harmonized elections of 23 August 2023. And this particular report, as I've pointed out, was done by myself, but I want to acknowledge people that also helped me to edit this report. I think there are people like Helen, there are people like Klengiwe, Mary Stella was involved at some point, and also I know that at some point Mr. Mbanje was also involved in this particular report. So thank you so much, colleagues, for your efforts and your diligence. Let me just give a brief background of this particular election so that I can then give the high level type of findings that came out. So the election was pretty much the 10th, if you are looking at the number of elections that the country has had since 1980. And it was the third under the 2013 constitution, which as we heard from Dr. Moyo, is about to be amended again, maybe for the third time. And now this time around, I think the amendment is going to be much more fundamental and far-reaching than we have seen in the first two amendments. And the battle for that particular election was pretty much, again, pitting two men, in this case, Emerson Mnangagwa from ZANU-PF, and Nelson Chamisa, who was at that point in time, the presidential candidate for the Triple C Citizens Coalition's change. And in that particular election, obviously, it happened at a time when Triple C had just been launched. I think it was it was less than probably a year old or so. It was almost a year and some months old when the election took place, and it was still very much a newbie in the political game. And these elections were also again the first to happen when Robert Mugabe and also Morgan Tsvangirai, who had been hogging the political limelight for a long time, were no longer part of that particular space. And the election obviously was harmonized in the sense that it allowed for parliamentary, presidential, and also local government elections to take place at the same time. And I think this has been something that Zimbabwe has been doing for some time now, and it continued again in the 23rd election. And also interestingly, in this particular election, we had 11 presidential candidates. Only one female candidate managed to pull through. This was Elizabeth Valerio. Another candidate that tried to have a hand raised, Linda Masarira, unfortunately failed to make it. I think because of the steep, nomination fees that were required. So she failed to raise that particular nomination fees, and then she fell along the way. But also something that was also very interesting is another candidate, Sevia Kasukuere, who apparently at that time was based in South Africa. He tried to file his candidature, but again, there were so many issues that happened, lots of court battles that happened that led, unfortunately, again to his disqualification. And at the end of the day, he failed to be part of the ballot box. In terms of parliamentarians, at least 68 of the 633 aspiring student parliamentarians were women, which again demonstrates that in terms of women entering into this brutal political space, it's increasingly becoming less and less women that are increasingly raising their hands. And I think again it speaks to the very complex but also very competitive nature of elections that we have seen of late in the Zimbabwean political sphere. The pre-election period was preceded, obviously, by well-coordinated lawfare targeting, obviously, the opposition, and we saw a lot of court battles. And I think one court battle that really took everybody by surprise was the disqualification of the failure to nominate, I think, 10 candidates, parliamentary candidates in Bulawayo, who were vying for MPs under the Triple C party. They tried to file their papers, but I think they were told that they were, they did that outside of the time that they were supposed to do that, and that raised a lot of problems, and there were lots of, court battles in and out until eventually they were then reinstated. And I think that was one signature, lawfare activity that we actually saw during that particular space. But also the other issue that also preceded this particular election was the gold mafia documentary that was beamed by Al Jazeera, which demonstrated and showed clearly that there is a lot of illicit financial dealings that are happening, especially with regards to gold, but also other minerals that are being taken out of Zimbabwe, going to as far afield as Dubai and many other places such as South Africa. But also again the way in which this particular documentary also showed that there was collusion between politicians and also other people that were also pretty much in the business space. And again, it also happened at a time when there was also a lot of geopolitical shifts that were happening. And again, at that time, Zimbabwe was actually discovered that it had a lot of lithium discovery deposits. And this again meant that different superpowers had their own interest in terms of seeing who was going to be the ultimate winner of that particular election. And the other issue that also came to mind during that particular election was the role of FAZ, which is an acronym for Forever Associates of Zimbabwe, a shadow CSO, which just popped up during that time. And according to some people, this particular outfit was funded by ZANU-PF through Kudata Tagwirei, and it really played a very huge role in terms of this particular election, in terms of making sure that they do what they were calling exit polling, but also making sure that they mobilize people that were going to vote. So essentially, this is the context in which this particular study was done. In terms of the methodology, obviously, I would just want to say that it also leaned heavily towards qualitative research methods, where a lot of document analysis was done, but also semi-structured interviews with key stakeholders were also conducted to just get an understanding of what was happening. So in terms of the timelines, this study was actually done between July and October 2023, and the report uses 4 main indicators which are indicated, I think, on this slide. If you can see, one is the total compliance, the other one is the substantial compliance, and then the other one that is also there is the partial compliance, and then there's no compliance at all is the last bit in terms of the indicators that were used in this particular. So what were the legal frameworks that were governing how this thing went about? So obviously this particular election happened in a context where obviously it was happening in the context of the African Human Rights Normative Framework. Of course, the SADC principles and guidelines governing democratic elections were very much important there. The Constitution of the Republic of Zimbabwe, the Freedom of Information Act, which which came into being after the repealing of IPA, was also something that was also very important. The Data Protection Act, which is also called the Cyber and Data Protection Act of December 2021, was also very important during that time. But also, it was also happening soon after COVID again. So the public health, COVID-19 prevention and containment and treatment national lockdown order of 2020 was still very much in action. But also the Anti-Corruption Act, again, was also very much an important pillar of that particular election that took place. So what are the key issues that I want to just bring to your attention? So whilst obviously one can say obviously there was some kind of proactive disclosure of information and some kind of transparency, especially by the electoral management body, in this case, ZEC. There were also issues around, for example, equitable access to public broadcasting, which again was very problematic because, as we have shown in this particular report, ZBC, and many other, newspapers affiliated, obviously, and run and controlled by government, failed to open up their airwaves, but also even their editorial space for the opposition and other people. But also what was also very interesting in this particular election was that it was happening at a time when there was a massive expansion in terms of people going online. So there was a heavy use of Twitter, which is now X, of course, but also Facebook, WhatsApp. TikTok was increasingly becoming a big thing, but of course it didn't really tilt the elections as probably X did in the last elections. But also what was also interesting in terms of the digital space was that it was also happening at a time when the ruling party, for the first time, when you compare to what used to happen during Robert Mugabe's time, allowed themselves to find themselves in a space where they would hire what I would call cyber tropes or cyber trolls called Varakashi. And these have become a very prominent key player in terms of mobilizing, but also delegitimizing narratives, especially on X and many other social media platforms. And on X, if you see, you would realize that a lot of misinformation and disinformation was playing itself out. And you could tell that some of it was actually being pushed, obviously, by Varakashi, but also the opposition also had their own, own cyber trolls that also played an important role in terms of sometimes diverting the attention, but also diffusing some of the narratives that were being fueled by these particular spaces. But something that was also very interesting in this particular election was the issue of gender disinformation campaigns. Again, that tended to focus and target women in politics. In this case, people like Fadzai Mahere, people like Ilinda Masarira were on the receiving end of some of these disinformation campaigns. Even at some point, people like Elizabeth Valerio also were also on the receiving end, and also journalists too, especially those who wanted to report on these particular issues were also equally, not spared. But also these particular elections also happened in a context where, as we have always seen in the Zimbabwean case, the law enforcement often they play a certain kind of, controlled, maybe stage managed kind of role where the state really want to make sure whatever is happening there is aligned with what they want to see happening. So even if, in cases where you would see maybe opposition political leaders have been beaten, the law enforcement would not be as as active and proactive in terms of dealing with those issues when you compare it to what would have happened when a ZANU-PF or a ruling party member has been maybe been beaten or has been threatened. So that again, that partisan law enforcement continued to play itself out in this particular election, and that created, unfortunately, an unease type of space where people had to navigate that particular information ecosystem, but also that political and electoral ecosystem that was dominated by the ruling party. Unfortunately, when we look at guideline number 12, for example, you would realize that ZEC, again, as we have always seen in the last couple of elections, ever since they replaced the Electoral Supervisory Commission that has been running the elections, this particular institution has been dogged, unfortunately, by concerns around its independence. And again, this played itself out in this particular election. Issues around impartiality. And again, if you see some of the disinformation campaigns that played themselves out, their commission chair, Chigumba, was constantly again being targeted, especially on social media. Again, most of the people, linking to some people that were within the ZANU-PF political party, but also the other issue that also which is still very much a serious issue, is the issue around the staffing of the commission with people that come from a security apparatus of the government. So in many instances, the militarization or the securitization of ZEC is one elephant in the room that continues to remain a critical issue that sometimes affects its independence, its impartiality, but sometimes it's seen as an extension of the ruling party, because people that would have served in other spheres of government would find themselves going to ZEC as a retirement package or as a space where they can then be able to protect the interests of the ruling party. But also here, I also argue that in terms of recommendation, the Parliament of Zimbabwe Public Service Commission and ZEC should publish salaries and conditions of service for all the commissioners and staff members at ZEC. Unfortunately, that has not happened. And I think this is something from an advocacy and lobbying perspective that needs to be done so that we can be able to know exactly how much these people are paid. But also the Parliament of Zimbabwe is also urged to broadcast public interviews of commissioners on its social media handles, especially nowadays, because we know that most Zimbabweans are also living outside of the country. So if they can actually be able to broadcast it on ZBC, they should be able to also do live streams on social media handles like X, Facebook, YouTube, and many others, so that people can also be able to see. That would also open up in terms of its transparency, but also in terms of accountability to the people. That would be very important. So one can say in some areas, ZEC tried to have significant types of compliancy. In some cases also they are tried, for example, in terms of modern criteria and processes of appointment of members. I think there was total compliance there because we would know who was appointed when and for how long. I think that was very clear. And in terms of their qualifications, the gender balance also was also something that they tried to do. Ethnic balance, because Zimbabwe again is a multi-ethnic country. They also tried to play that card. But also in terms of qualifications and experience, again, one can say that there was a lot of total compliance there. Appointment processes of members, again, one can also say there was total compliance. But it is in those issues where you have to look at remuneration, conditions of service, the procedure for the termination. That's where I think those issues really need to be looked at critically. And then in terms of guideline number 13, I think there was limited information generally on how ZEC proactively disclosed how it formulated clear procedures for making requests of information. The only information available was the government gazette, which set the cost for accessing and reproducing the voters' roll. And again, it was just that, and anything else, it became very difficult. And again, even the cost of accessing the voters' roll was even beyond the reach of many people. And that also, again, created another issue that we witnessed during the rundown towards that particular election. So it is important that ZEC is strongly urged to create an online database where citizens can track how they keep, organize, and maintain records. And I think this is something that is very important if they want to demonstrate that they have proactive disclosure of information and accountability at the heart of their operations. And it's something that they really need to take seriously. I know that I don't want to walk let me just try and move a bit faster. In terms of guideline number 14, ZEC, of course, as I have already pointed out, is obviously serviced by the full-time secretariat headed by the chief elections officer, and ZEC is also legal procurement, internal audit, and security units which offer support to the institution. It also has got a website that is also there. So in terms of having information that you can access online, I think they are trying to do something there. But in terms of recommendations, my recommendations would be to say that ZEC should ensure that the interviews for staff working for the secretariat are made public, and I think that's something that we rarely know about. We just only get to know it when we are going towards elections, when people's names begin to be quoted, especially in certain media spaces. ZEC's decision-making processes should also be transparent through periodic press conferences and press statements. Of course, they used to try to do that, but again, in some cases when, for example, there were delays around distribution of election materials in Harare and Bulawayo and some parts of Manicaland, again, there ZEC was found wanting. They were not proactive enough in terms of saying what was really happening. People had only to speculate, and there was a lot of rumor mongering that was happening on social media, that it was a strategy to try and stifle people's its right to vote, so that at least the ruling party can maintain its political stronghold. So again, that is something that I think from an electoral management point of view, I think more needs to be done in terms of dealing with that. Guideline number 15. In terms of membership, the ZEC website provided information for the people who oversaw the August 23 elections. There was public available information on ZEC's policy, on declaration of assets and interests of its members, but there was nothing around lifestyle audits of the people that work there, whether they have been able to declare their own interests and assets. There was nothing, but there is a policy. But what has been done in terms of making sure that people are comply with these particular policies, that again is still something that is missing. ZEC, of course, has got a code of conduct for political parties and candidates, but again, this code of conduct is not really being being applied in a non-partisan manner. In some cases, when the ruling party is on the offside, the ZEC does not say anything. They are mute, they are silent about those kinds of issues. But when the opposition is on the wrong side, then they are seen to be applying this particular code of conduct. And again, that creates an issue where people feel that the electoral management body is not as as independent as it should be in this particular context. So what should be recommended? I think ZEC must also establish constituents multi-partisan liaison committee, because already they do have other multi-party liaison at a national level, but I think at a constituent level that there's need to do that, because some of the issues that really affect the way in which the election plays itself out actually happens at a constituent level. So if you only rely on a national multi-partisan liaison committee, you might not be able to handle with issues that are actually happening at the grassroots. So there is need to make sure that is done. But that liaison committee should also take into account issues around gender, age, race, ethnicity, because again, these are very important, because people should be seen to be represented from a wide spectrum of society, so that it speaks to all the voters that are being given a platform to exercise their right to vote. In terms of number 17, pre-election space, ZEC did not publicly release a detailed electoral calendar. It only talked about the electoral roadmap, and that was it. And it was done through a press conference, and that we do have a electoral roadmap, but it was not proactively distributed to people to say, this is what it means, this is the calendar, this is when we are going to print this particular information, this is when we are going to do this. It was just a roadmap that they said they claimed that they had, but it was not then distributed to people. The commission failed to release a verified national voters roll to all political contestants as required by the law. Again, that created a lot of problems because there was a lot of court cases that that also came into the space. Even CSOs like Pachedu and many other tried to enter into that particular ecosystem and try to push Zeki to release, but it was to no avail. So there is a lot that Zeki can do in terms of going forward to make sure that the voters' roll should be made available to all political contestants ahead of time, and it should be in a user-friendly manner. Because again, the other issue that also came out last time was that the voters' roll was not produced in a user-friendly manner. It was very difficult for certain kinds of people to be able to deal with it. So going forward, there's need to make sure that ZEC should provide information on the number of applications received from local and international observers so that people can tell how many have been accepted, how many people have been turned down, but we didn't have that kind of information. The only information that ZEC made available was the amount of money that people were supposed to pay to make sure that they are registered either as a local or a foreign observer. And again, these are issues that I think ZEC needs to work on, so that I'll jump all this so that I move on to other issues, because I know that we need to have a conversation around this. Let me move on to guideline number 20. Which deals obviously with the internal information from a political party perspective. All the major political parties, ZANU-PF, MDCT, CCC, NCA, ZAP, and many others, they do have constitutions, but some of these constitutions are not readily available online. It's only the ZANU-PF and MDCT, which is good constitution that you can actually be able to Google and be able to find online. The others, for example, CCC, they claimed that they had a constitution, but I think the issue was just they had something, but it was never made available to people. And even when they had on their own internal issues around structures and many things, again, I think the institution of constitution again came back to haunt them because they could not really provide it. It's something that really is something that they need to work on going forward if they want to be seen as a credible opposition political party. The other issue is to say that in terms of recommendations, political parties in Zimbabwe are urged to proactively share information on the number of registered members, their age, geographical location, and gender. Where possible, they should be able to give us this information, but also where they are getting funding from. We need to be able to know who are the funders. If they are collecting membership fees, how much is being collected, and how much do they have right now, and where is it being kept? Is it being invested in other investment, infrastructure or something? So we need to be able to know that. But unfortunately, right now, there's an opacity around that in both the opposition and the ruling party. There should be some kind of mechanisms to be able to make sure that people understand what's really happening around people's money. Because we know that in CCC, there were claims that the people raised money to buy cars, for the president. They also raised money to pay, observers and election agents, but again, that money has not been accounted to. And again, opacity, cascades opposition and also ruling party. So again, there's need to make sure that all the political parties are very proactive in terms of that. In terms of guideline number 20, the legal framework, although there was information about the public funds which were released to ZANU-PF and MDCT by the Treasury, all the political parties were not transparent about their funds received from private sources. So besides the money that we know that the Treasury released to ZANU-PF and MDCT, there's a lot of silence around where did these other political parties got the money to campaign, to pay agents. It's very unclear up to now whether it was coming from public sources, private sources. It's very much something that needs to be sorted out if we are going to see a lot of transparency into the next electoral cycle, if ever we are going back to have elections, given that Dr. Tabani Moyo was talking about constitutional amendment number 3. In terms of guideline number 22, political parties in Zimbabwe did not proactively disclose their private sources of, I think I've talked to that. Let me try and jump. I need to finish now. Guideline number 23, ZEC issued a notice inviting persons and organizations wishing to observe the electoral process and as I've pointed out, yes, that was released, the amount of money they were supposed to pay. So there was some kind of, partial compliance there. There was also some kind of, significant compliance in terms of code of conduct for observers and monitors, but also financial and non-financial assistance. There was non-compliance. Nobody knew where ZEC got the money to do either the voter mobilization, all these other things that they did. We only know the money that came from the government, and some that were said to have come from UNDP and many other UN bodies. But in terms of other private sources of funding, I think there is still very much secrecy around that. So going forward, ZEC again is urged to make sure that they are very clear and very transparent in terms of how they are dealing with these particular issues in their spaces. Guideline number 24. The police, again, did not explicitly make available its code of conduct in the run-up of election. Of course, there was the roadmap that we also heard from Commissioner Matanga via a press conference. But as far as in terms of what exactly this code of conduct is all about, nobody did not really know what exactly was going to happen when the police had to do their duties in different constituencies. There's also evidence of training sessions on human rights and policing, but also I would also want to credit the police also for working with organizations like MISA. I think in the last elections they worked with MISA in terms of trying to make sure that they understand the role of journalists in the electoral cycle, and I think it's something that should be applauded and be continued going into the future, because it has got the potential to make sure that journalists do not suffer casualties, or journalists are not then beaten up during elections as we have seen in the past. And I think that can also improve the atmosphere around the safety of journalists in the electoral cycle. So that collaboration between civil society organizations and the police, I think, was something worth talking about, because it really showed that when two different entities decide to really put their differences aside and then work together, something of value can actually come out of that. I'll jump this and move on to 26 and 28. Zimbabwe has had a challenge in terms of internet shutdowns, and I think one can actually say in the last probably 5 to 6 years, I think Zimbabwe has actually been able to see at least 3 or 4 internet shutdowns, and these have come in various shades. And I think as we are moving towards the 23 August 2023 elections, there were fears that internet shutdowns was likely to happen again. And I think what we also saw generally was that the quality of internet access was degraded, especially on the 22nd of August. There were instances where certain political parties' rallies, which were being live streamed all along, all of a sudden people struggled to be able to witness what was happening there, because there is a claim. And I think that is also being supported by people that really work around internet shutdowns, obviously, like Access Now, where they demonstrate clearly that actually at that point in time, the quality of election, the quality of internet and the speed of internet was being throttled in the Zimbabwean context. So that again created a challenge for especially for the CCC, whose rallies were actually affected because of that. So in future, obviously, there's also this issue to say the government of Zimbabwe should keep the internet on, because it is part and parcel of the information ecosystem, but also the communication sphere that people actually rely on to get to know what really is happening in that particular space. In terms of guideline number 29, compliance with guideline number 29, which has to do with media and online media platforms. ZBC is obviously the Zimbabwean Broadcasting Corporation, which is the public service broadcaster, is obligated to keep a fair balance in the allocation of broadcasting hours during elections. But unfortunately, this didn't happen. And I think there were, some ZANU-PF members that were very clear to say that if you want, you can have your own ZBC. This one is our own. So I think that one it's now clear, I think even for the opposition going into the future, that they would know that as long as the ruling party is in charge, they would make sure that they will not give anybody any piece of pie on on the national broadcaster. They would have to find their own alternative platforms to air their own political views. Otherwise, the ZBC becomes a preserve of those that are in power. So there is need going forward, obviously, to make sure that we professionalize ZBC from a state broadcaster to a proper public service broadcaster. That is something that I think people like MISA or organizations like MISA, MAS, they have to really work hard to make sure that it becomes a reality, because it is right now, it is still very much partisan. So there is need to make sure that that happens. And then as CSOs, most CSOs obviously proactively disclosed information about their organizational aims. There was in this particular report, we had, I think, about 10, a sample of 10 main CSOs that we looked at, and we looked at their communication, platforms that they use, both offline and online. There was, a rich kind of data there that showed that CSOs were trying to do as much in terms of pushing out a lot of content through pamphlets, through newsletters, but also doing a lot online. So there was a rich information that could be seen there. So one can actually say there was significant compliance around that particular issue. But unfortunately, in terms of who funds these particular CSOs, what are the interests of the people that are funding them? Again, there is a lot of opacity around that. And again, proactive disclosure around these issues, I think, becomes very important. Their own conflict of interest, they did not declare that. Again, that also creates a problem, because when they are trying to hold those into power, those in power also push the same kind of hand to them to say, you are not accountable to anyone in the first place before we can account to you. So again, that creates a back and forth kind of an issue. So CSOs, to be able to navigate that particular dilemma, they need to be able to show that they walk the talk and they live by their talk, and I think that becomes very important. So, what are the key recommendations? I think what is very clear is that to be able to come up with a very proactive and solid information ecosystem going forward, you would not need one player there. You need many players, and I think the Parliament of Zimbabwe needs to play their role. The electoral management body, ZEC, has to play their role. They need to live within the mandates of being independent, impartiality, and they should be able to show that they are the referee of these elections and not a player or a quasi-player in the political sphere. Appointing authorities, the government, the parliament should also play their role in terms of making sure that the appointing processes are done above board, and everybody must know how and why these particular people have been chosen as the people to sit in these bodies. Law enforcement agencies, here we're talking about ZRP, ZDF, but also we know in Zimbabwe that it's beyond this. There's the war veterans. These are, again, people that are very powerful when it comes to elections. There's the CIOs, there's state security. CIOs are also very important when it comes to this. But as we also saw in the last elections, organizations like FAS, and also now we also have got the border cases, youth that are also coming back. These also, they are shadow law enforcement agencies that also have got a very important role to play if we have to look at the deep state of Zimbabwean politics. So again, political parties have got a role to play, ruling and opposition. The media, traditional and digital, especially now as we go towards the next set of elections, podcasting is increasingly becoming very important. Content creators and social media influencers are becoming more important than actually traditional media. So again, their role in this particular ecosystem becomes very important. Regulatory bodies like ZMC, BARS are very, very important. Portras are also very important in terms of making sure the internet remains on, and they should make sure that there is no throttling of the internet so that people can actually be able to do what they have to do. Observers, both international and domestic, and again in this last election, it was the first election probably in a long time where ZANU-PF was actually told by international observers, especially the African Union and SADC, that the elections were not really free, fair, and credible. And I think it created a lot of problems, especially for Dr. Nevas Mumba, who was the lead for SADC, I think, Observer Mission, and he was subjected to many kind of disinformation campaigns on social media. And again, that is another issue that we really need to look out for as we move on towards elections. So there's a lot that can be done in terms of dealing with these issues. Civil society organizations, both local and international, they also have got a long play, but also citizens, the voters themselves. I think we might want all these other players to play a role. But I think some of the disinformation is actually being pushed by ordinary people, not really, well coordinated, well oiled disinformation, trolls like your Ravara Cash. So I think we would need everyone to play a role so that at least we can arrive at a information ecosystem where people are free to say what they want to say, but also to express their thoughts and to express their right to vote without fear or fear of being judged or harassed or anything. So there is a lot that can be done, but I think let me stop there because I know that I have hogged the limelight for too long. Over to you, Belinda. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Prof. Murray. That was very detailed, and I'm not going to try and summarize all of that, but I'm going to call Tendai, Mr. Tendai Mbanje, who is going to comment on that. Tendai, over to you.
Thank you so much, Belinda, and colleagues from the Center for Human Rights for organizing this important webinar to launch this important book, findings with critical findings for taking Zimbabwe further in the next electoral cycle, or in the next elections rather. I would like to thank everyone who have made some remarks, but in particular, let me draw on the presentation of Professor Mare. I would like to, I will not in a sense regurgitate what the findings that he has been sharing with us from the research that was done and that some of us were part of in its finalization. I would like to thank him for the context. Of course, the context was very important. And if you look at all the reports that have been launched by the center, the Zimbabwean context is a very complex one. And even you could see that at the drafting phase of the report, in terms of the information, getting the information to put it out there, it's not easy. Even the stakeholders that were consulted should, even if you are to do stakeholder engagement as a researcher in the context of Zimbabwe, it's not always easy due to the nature of the political landscape, what Professor Murray just called the deep state of the Zimbabwean state. Zimbabwean politics, and I think the methodology was sound. It was incredible. It has brought us to where we are, to so far as the quality of insights that we have, that and the quality of recommendations that we have, that will the stakeholders will take into consideration as they prepare for the next elections. And then we also use these insights, these recommendations for the purposes of advocacy and lobbying these very same stakeholders as we approach the elections. And but most importantly, I want to draw your attention to this creature that we are discussing, the guidelines. You see that the report was drafted, it was finalized last year when the guidelines, it was in its 8th year of anniversary, and this year will mark the 9th year. For those who are attending, the guidelines were adopted. These guidelines to access information and elections in Africa was adopted on 15 November in 2017. And they're fairly new, and we celebrate their impact as we see how the Center for Human Rights have been using this tool to assess electoral processes that have been conducted in many parts of the country. They're fairly new, but the impact as well and the insights that are coming from this, I think, this is a win. This is the win for the African continent. This is the win for the work of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. And most importantly, maybe that was not too clarified in the findings, that at the center of these guidelines is clarification on how Article 9 of the African Charter applies to electoral context, and in the context of Zimbabwe, complex electoral context. And so we are seeing how this report is clarifying the provisions of Article 9, and insofar as it applies to electoral context. And Article 9 provides for the access to information of the African Charter. So, and as we have seen throughout, that Article 9, by its very nature and how it was drafted, was broad and lacked detailed guidance, especially in elections. So that's why you see that these guidelines, they expand, involving all kinds of electoral stakeholders. And that's why when you see that Professor Murray was expanding from a stakeholder to each stakeholder, each stakeholder to each stakeholder, to make sure that there is the adequate understanding on this. And I think that he did an amazing job on that. And as we have seen that throughout the presentation, he was in a way, when he was articulating the findings, clarifying state obligations under Article 9 of the African Charter, which then in our view, when we take these findings, they help to strengthen the democratic participation and prevent opaque elections. We need elections that are transparent. We need elections that where information is at the center for elections. There are two things that are part of that are central to credible and legitimate electoral process. It's funding of elections and information on elections. So I think these guidelines are the guidelines are doing amazing work in so far as they are helping us to unpack and improve the quality of the elections that we'll have in the future. Hopefully, that there will be a political will among stakeholders to take these recommendations seriously. And at the heart of this, as Professor Murray was explaining, you could see that there's an attempt to explain how the guidelines help us to guard against abuse in elections, and particularly in our context, Zimbabwe, in a competitive or fragile democracy, as it has been described by scholars. And there's also, when he was explaining, you could see that the tone of the guidelines helps us to see how our elections in the context of Zimbabwe aligned with the practice of international norms, African human rights, legal instruments, international norms, particularly on those that impact on freedom of information and access to information. So I think the guidelines have set a tone in the context of many elections in terms of our analysis. I think it's a victory, like I had said. And the significance of this is that we see that through this report and other reports produced by the Center for Human Rights in assessing the provisions of Article 9 of the African Charter in the African electoral context, we see that we're setting a continental standard in so far as access to information is concerned in electoral context. I think so far I would say nothing beats these assessments, because they are really sound, they are really practical, and they in my view, they are practical advocacy tools that we can take use and forge forward for the future of elections. But most importantly, we also need to understand that the guidelines are soft law in nature. They are not binding. But as we have seen in terms of the recommendations, they are persuasive to authorities and to the authorities of also of the national laws. They are empowering. In my view, I think they give the civil society, journalists, political parties, um, the number of stakeholders that they give a parliament, electoral management bodies, which are central to the organization of elections, appointing authorities, law enforcement, media, regulatory bodies, and observers. They empower with information. They also empower with what the entitlements that these all stakeholders may have insofar as access to information in electoral contests is concerned, because they're also electoral players, you know. So I think this is a victory, like I said, and I commend Professor Mare for wonderful work, and colleagues at the Center for Human Rights, and the leadership by then that guided us to produce these reports. And I at that time I was in the unit that is doing this work, and by then our reporting authority was Mr. Lloyd Govea, for his leadership in producing this quality of work, and in producing this quality advocacy tools, in my view, that will help future of elections in the context of Zimbabwe. And we're going to use these same templates to actually also assess the elections that are happening across the continent. We hope there will be more funding from the partners to ensure that this good work does not die natural death, but continues to flourish and to inform how we could conduct credible and legitimate and elections that meet international standards as stipulated within the international human rights framework. So I think these could be my submissions, and thank you, Professor Murray. Thank you, the colleagues, for this wonderful work.
Thank you so much, Tendai. That was very good and straightforward synopsis. In the interest of time, may I please call Dr. Tabani Moyo, because he has another engagement that's coming, so we really need his input before he gets in the other commitment that he has. Dr. Tabani Moyo, the stage is yours now.
Thank you very much. I don't think I'll be long. I think the prof did quite a great job in unpacking the landscape, and Tendai's intervention pertaining to the framework, which he aptly highlights that this is soft law. Soft law is there to encourage member states, underlining, encouraging them. But because of this soft law, it gives stakeholders the framework upon which to work closely with the different stakeholders to push through certain dynamics that help to guide the development and evolution of an electoral environment. In this regard, I want to make 5 key observations from the perspective of a civic player in the country, and what we saw as permeating through this whole process. The first one is that once a proclamation is made, moving from the soft law to the national laws, once a proclamation is made by the president, the affairs of regulation of the media moves from the Zimbabwe Media Commission to the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission. Herein lies many key challenges and contradictions that we have highlighted in this past election. The first major sticking point is the crisis of dual accreditation. which is you have two electoral bodies charging for a same service to the industry. So if you were accredited that year for a journalistic license or a media house, like some might say, no, $20 is little for you to complain. A media house in Masvingo, for example, let's say tells him might have 20 journalists and they're accredited at $20 each. That's almost $400. And now once they are done with that payment, then an election is proclaimed within that period. It means that they are also going to pay an additional $400. So within a single year, they've paid 1,000 plus or minus 1,000 US dollars just to observe an election, to cover an election. Why? Because you pay to ZMC. Once an election is proclaimed, you pay again for accreditation to Zimbabwe Electoral Commission. That's the first conundrum that comes to the fore. The second one is that the issues of privacy played out in quite a dangerous way in this election. I had to write to. I'm really a controversial person, and I try to stick it that way. But this time around, I had to stick my head to the block. I had to write to POTRAS, Postal and Telecommunications Regulatory Authority, as a data protector. Why? Because here's an example. In the last election of 2008, it was constituency-based voting, and I was not registered in Harare. I was registered in Manicaland. Now, in 2023, it was constituency-based. It was polling station-based election polling, and I'd moved from Manicaland to Harare. And this time around, it was digital identities. We were giving our digital information to ZEC. And remember, it was done computerized, everything. Towards the elections, I started receiving solicitations from the head of state and government as a ruling party president, saying, "Dear Taban, I know that you are voting at polling station XXX in Harare. I need your vote." So I wrote protesting to POTRAS to say, how did he know that I moved from Manicaland to Harare? What was I gave my personal information as safeguarded in Cyber and Data Protection Act to ZEC, not to political parties. So I instructed POTRAS to investigate, but POTRAS then came back to me and said, no, we need to get a trend that this is national. We need you to give us 10 more people from different provinces so that we can deduce if it was national. I exceeded 10. I gave them 60 people from across the country. When they received the information, they then wrote to me the following day to say, you see, given that you have given us these people, because I gave with the screenshots of the messages they were receiving, can you bring these people to our offices the following day? I said, I've done my role as a citizen to alert you of the obligation that you have in terms of the law. And I'm not taking this case further, but I want you to put on record that I have made a request for you to investigate, a failure of which I shall take legal action. So then they responded by saying, it's fine, we're investigating. And after some 2-3 weeks, they came back and say, no, we couldn't find the perpetrator. Maybe it's a mobile network operator. Maybe it's ZEC. Maybe all sorts of pillar to post style. So the issue of privacy in an election is a key issue, which was wantonly violated, and no one was held accountable. When you submit your data to ZEC, we presume that it is the safest way it is going to be kept away from third parties. And in this regard, it was porous. The third issue, which Prof. Admayamare highlighted around internet degrading of internet speeds and services. So that is limited in terms of how you access internet during and post an election period was another issue that we noted. The issue of state media coverage, he has already alluded to it, which I will not belabor. I'll give you the issue of accreditation of foreign journalists, which played out in a very nasty way as we were in this election. Firstly, the ministry played some hide and seek games. They then started convoluting what is a foreign journalist. They said we have got foreign correspondents already accredited here. It's enough, which is unfair because during an election, foreign media bring crew, which will then allow them to go and cover the entire spectrum of the country because they will move across the country. But they make sure that they throttled that and allow for foreign journalists who are stringers with limited capacity to cover the whole country. A case in point was that of a Kenyan broadcasting crew, which came. That one was accredited on paper. Arrived at the airport and they were given technicalities why they can't bring their equipment into the country. So they were told, no, leave your equipment here, proceed. When we have cleared it, we'll alert you. Then entire election happened and the entire election ended and they were given the equipment on exit. Technically, you have denied these people access because you have allowed them in person but without the means to cover an election. So broadly, these are some of the submissions I thought might need to help in shaping the conversations. Unfortunately, I will not stay long because I had committed to other conversations basing on the then to tie it with my last point, last, please, pardon me, issue of media monitoring. Because of the proclamation, ZEC is also supposed to constitute an election monitoring committee, which must also instruct us. I am saying us because we are in a partnership to launch this report, that the timing of the launch should be as close to the electoral period as is possible, to allow for it to inform the electoral environment. We have always, brought it to the commission that they establish a committee. It monitors the whole election period, like a referee who monitors the whole soccer match, but never intervenes to cushion or to provide disciplinary measures to the players until the game is over. Then 12 months later, what they do is to write a report that goes to parliament and it ends there. The election is over, it's done with. They failed to intervene in the situation to help tilt the environment and allow for fairness in terms of reportage. And the reason why they do that is because, of course, they will be eager to protect the state broadcaster. So these are some of the observations that we thought might also help in stimulating the conversations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Tabani Moyo. Before we let you off the hook, could you please just briefly share the legal and policy reforms that you'd probably want us to focus on, or that MISA is focusing on with regards to this, so that we can incorporate it even after you have left the meeting?
Yeah, the issue of dual accreditation, which I highlighted, to have a legal mechanism that allows for a single constitutional body to accredit journalists, so that if you put it in an electoral law, it will then say, for example, ZMC or during an election, the ZEC is entitled to is supposed to accredit journalists, of which by providing an accreditation which is valid from ZMC will be deemed adequate for the purposes of the accreditation of this election. So its role become administrative rather than to charge for the same service twice to the same constituents within the year. That's the first one. The second one will be dealing with issues of privacy, to provide an appeal mechanism when privacy is violated, in the case of which I've put on record of MISA having, not MISA, myself on behalf of MISA having challenged Potras to investigate how third parties got access to my personal data as a key issue. in terms of compliance, in terms of data integrity and safeguarding of personal data during an election. The third issue is around the accreditation of foreign media during an election. I think there should be a legal provision that says application is done online, and there must be a tracking mechanism so that once you apply, it's not at the discretion of the ministry for them to say you have succeeded or not. Other journalists were just given one sentence in response. Unfortunately, we cannot accredit you. We apologize for an inconvenience. And so the law should explain how you arrive to certain decisions, because this is public policy, and this is a public event which is supposed to reach certain benchmarks in terms of how a credible election is reached at. So you must have an online tracking system once you lodge your application, and reasons should be outlined where there are challenges pertaining to accreditation, rather than to leave it at the discretion of the minister or the ministry or anyone thereafter. The fourth and final issue is around the issue, no, the fourth, second from last, around the issue of media monitoring. To instruct that the media monitoring is a mechanism to intervene and ensure that the media coverage is fair and accurate during an election, with clear interventions outlined so that it gives credibility to the election in terms of media performance, rather than to issue a report after a year to parliament, which is as good as an academic report. The last component is around the domestication of the UN Action Plan on Safety and Security of Journalists to be part of the domestic remedies that will then form the protection mechanism for journalists during an election, from impunity in terms of attacks, and ensure that there are guarantees that they are free to cover elections. Of course, we have done a lot in terms of interventions. The last election, we worked well with multiple stakeholders, including police, government, regulatory authorities, academia, the media itself. We came up with what we call the media pledge to cover the election in the highest possible standards, and then the stakeholders pledged to protect the media during the election. To that effect, we were fortunate that we recorded 0 police-induced attacks, which was a plus, because in the last elections, police were at the forefront. And because of this relationship as an MOU that we have with the police, it has smoothened our relationship. So the strategic need to domesticate the UN Action Plan, so that there is the predictability when you're covering elections or national events that require public participation and information remaining a public good. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Savani. Your contribution and partnership is truly appreciated. We wouldn't have done this without you. So we really hope that we continue with our collaborations in the future. Thank you for your time.
Greatly appreciated. I wish you great deliberations.
Thank you. I'd also want to announce that Prof. Admayamari just excused himself. He also had a meeting that he has jumped into. Without taking much of our time, I would like to introduce Mr. Lloyd Kuvea to give his brief remarks as well. As Tendai has mentioned, he was part of our leadership when this was started, and it would be an honor to have him speak on this regard.
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Lloyd.
Yes, thank you very much, Belinda. Thank you for the invitation and for giving me this opportunity to also say a few words. Firstly, just to thank Professor Mare for doing a great job. I think the report was quite comprehensive and objective. And also thank you to the entire team at the Center for Human Rights for driving this process and coming to this stage of the launch of the report on the Zimbabwe elections. Thank you so much for the great work. I just have a few things to mention regarding this particular Zimbabwe elections report. Firstly, I think what is important to say is that these guidelines are a product of norms developed within the African continent. And therefore, there can be no accusations that the standards that are being used are not, they are foreign to this continent. They are not foreign. These are African standards. And a big thank you really to the African Commission for having developed such standards, which are now being used as a reference point, to assess compliance with standards on access to information during election period, looking at all the stakeholders that are involved in running an election and ensuring that elections are credible, they are free and fair. Secondly, I also wanted to just say that it would be very interesting, really, to also go to countries where we have seen interesting election outcomes. Countries like Congo Brazzaville recently, the President Denis Sassou Nguesso won by 95%. And also, we witnessed the election victory by Mama Samia Suluhu in Tanzania, winning by 98%. And, in 2024, I think we had President Paul Kagame winning by 99%. What has always fascinated me, and I've always wondered, is were these elections actually transparent? Were they held in an environment where there was compliance with these guidelines we are discussing today? It will be very interesting, really, to apply these guidelines to such elections where you have such incredible kind of election outcomes. And then the other issue I wanted to also mention is that we hope that the next launch will be from a French-speaking country and perhaps a Lusophone-speaking country. I think the center worked on reports again covering Mozambique, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and Senegal. So I'm hoping, Belinda, that maybe the next one will be the Senegal report or the DRC report, and so on and so forth, if they have not yet been launched. I just wanted to mention those two things before I go into the findings, which are quite interesting. First of all, I think for me at the center of the disputes of elections, electoral outcomes in Zimbabwe is the issue of the voters' roll. And it's interesting that we are discussing this, the outcomes of the Zimbabwe elections and how it was run in the context of the constitutional amendment process. Now, when you look at the bill number 3, amending the constitution, the current constitution, there is a proposal to move the role of the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission in registering voters and managing the voters' roll and ensuring that that voters' roll is accessible to all the actors and that also people are able, to check it, to use it for their own purposes. And the proposal is to move it from the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission to the Registrar General. This was the previous arrangement before this current proposal, where the Registrar General was managing the voters' roll. And again, we saw the kind of opacity that the Professor Murray is mentioning in his findings, that even the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission itself did not make the voters' roll available to contestants, to political parties, even maybe to voters who would want to see what's happening. So, the sad reality for me is that this has become a constant issue in the Zimbabwe electoral processes where the voters' roll has not been made available. And this is really, as Professor Murray has stated, contrary to what is contained in the guidelines on access to information during elections. And this has to change. We hope that there's going to be a shift. And personally, I hope that what the government must do regarding its proposals is to ensure that Zimbabwe Electoral Commission retains that role of registering voters, of managing the voters' roll, and so on and so forth. What needs to happen is to ensure that these values that we are talking about are complied with by the electoral management body. That should not be difficult to do. You just need to have competent people in that body. And it's one of the Chapter 12 institutions in Zimbabwe, that are supposed to be monitoring the democratization in Zimbabwe and ensuring that we uphold democratic standards and principles. But to remove that role and give it to the Registrar General, who is embedded within the public service in government, is going to be very problematic, because I doubt that the Registrar General will exercise any form of independence and autonomy. Once the Registrar General is the one who is now managing the voters' roll, or responsible for the registration of voters. And so the other issue I wanted to mention as well is this issue of unequal access to the public broadcaster. We have had this challenge for a long time in Zimbabwe. And I just wanted to ask, it's a pity that Professor Murray has left and Dr. Moyo has also left, but I would have loved to hear from them whether investing in alternative media might actually help, given the position of the ruling party that the ZBC belongs to them, and they are the ones who are going to be covered by the ZBC. What about investment in alternative media? And as the government made it easier for other players to enter the media fraternity, and perhaps they would be able to then cover opposition political parties that are not receiving any form of coverage from the public broadcaster. Perhaps that could assist. But what I also found a bit disturbing as well is the fact that the issue of transparency, when it comes to the issue of conflict of interest, it sort of cuts across all stakeholders, in the running of the elections. So that is disturbing. Let's hope that there's going to be an improvement. The issue of also releasing information about sources of funding. It's another very sensitive issue. Let us hope that all stakeholders in Zimbabwe are going to be a bit more mature and less paranoid about releasing information about their sources of funding. Because that has also been an issue of contention. There have always been suspicions and so on and so forth about where is money coming from, for the various institutions. So, I mean, I think hopefully we can have some kind of improvement. But also, I would like to say a big thank you to MISA, really, for training law enforcement officers on human rights issues. That is really a welcome development, and let's hope that it will continue, and that perhaps more than just the police, other enforcement officials will also be trained. I would also want to propose that perhaps this training should also be extended to judicial officers and prosecutors. So when election disputes are being handled, or people are being arrested and being sent to the courts during election periods, these officers should really be able to understand what election processes are all about, especially the issue of ensuring that human rights are protected during election periods. And when they are adjudicating electoral disputes, they should be doing so from an informed position, knowing about some of these standards and norms. So I would like to end there in terms of my my submissions, Belinda, but also the issue of internet shutdowns. I think it has become a default position with so many autocratic governments on the African continent. And I hope that something can be done, particularly, issues around the regulatory bodies, ensuring that there isn't any interference when it comes to ensuring that there's no throttling of the internet and even shutting down in some cases, to enable the free flow of information during election times to avoid any kind of violations of human rights and so on and so forth. I must end there, Belinda, and give others an opportunity so that we can continue with the conversation. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Lloyd. And yes, you were on point about the French speaking report launches. We are going to be launching them in the following weeks. So we definitely have that lined up. Thank you for your remarks. Before I come to Unique from the media sector, Heart and Soul TV, I just want to confirm, because we do have a representative from the Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission who joined in on behalf of Ms. Fungai Jesima Jome, who couldn't be here with us because of prior commitments. Apparently, the date that we now opted for, she was busy, and we do understand. I'm not too sure if Priscilla, you want to say anything or you're fine. I just didn't want to not put you on the spotlight to speak, yet you have something planned. And if there is nothing, it's really appreciated. Your presence alone is much appreciated here. So you can just confirm if there is any remarks that you want to share or you're fine.
Thank you, Belinda. Yes, I was asked to attend, but perhaps I might not be able to cover the issues that you may have wanted me to cover, but maybe just to highlight that we are grateful for the report, highlighting the key findings presented by Professor Mare. If you look at our 2023 elections report, you'll find that some of the issues were raised in that report. There are similar issues concerning the availability of the voters' roll on time, voter registration, the candidate nomination fees, which we raised in our report, as well as media, access to state media, the problems that were faced by our political parties in ensuring that they are able to access the state media. And then in terms of our work as the Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission, that during elections, these are the issues that we assess. We ensure that we assess the situation before the elections and also during the elections, looking into these issues of the practices during electoral processes, also accountability of our stakeholders. We engaged a number of stakeholders during the 2023 elections, and we received also a lot of complaints on some of the conduct of our stakeholders whom we expect to be accountable during elections, such as our security forces, traditional leaders. I think the issue of traditional leaders, we've raised it over and over again that they should not be involved in partisan politics, and also not force villagers to attend rallies and so on. So really, largely the findings, they are very much similar to the findings that Prof. Mare presented. So I just wanted to just state that, Belinda. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Priscilla, for your contribution. I didn't want to not put you on the spot. I'd seen Miss Majome's email, but thank you so much for your contribution. Unique, you're still in, yes. May you please unmute yourself and give us your remark, as this is something that affects you within the media sector. Unique is from Heart and Soul TV.
Thank you very much, Belinda. So I'll start with talking about how lack of proactive disclosures hindered some of our live broadcasts at Heart and Soul. And I think it was a wait and see crisis where we noticed that on election day, as reports poured in, about the polling stations failing to open in areas such as Harare and Bulawayo, our newsroom was in quite a precarious position because without a proactive digital statement from the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, early in the morning, we were kind of forced to choose between, reporting unverified citizen reports, which were obviously flooding social media and the internet, or staying silent, whilst our audience demanded answers. So, there was a little bit of a conflict there where you didn't know what was true and what wasn't, especially when ZEC hadn't verified anything. When we also jumped to the results statements, during the tallying period, I think the absence of real-time digital results or a dashboard at least created a lag, that information disorder agents or audiences exploited to fill in the silence with fake results. So when we look at some of the factors, if we look at misinformation and disinformation, I think we actually integrated a fact check segment during the election period during our live stream in partnership with ZimFact, because obviously we can't do this by ourselves. So we trusted ZimFact to be able to help us to verify certain information and to talk about some of the challenges that were being faced whilst we were debunking these issues. But also, we realized, as Professor Maria said, that there was a lot of gendered disinformation, and we were very intentional about bringing in female candidates and female analysts into the studio to give them a platform to talk about their narratives as well, being intentional, because what we also realized was the percentage of males was obviously much higher, in the 80% of males tuning into our programs. But when we did start bringing in the female candidates, the female analysts, our percentages grew higher as women start tuning in as well. We were also navigating the patriotic bill atmosphere and operating under a cloud of self-censorship concerns due to the legislation, where you're looking at our role as one of the strategic media partners in the elections. We were looking at what could get us in trouble and what wouldn't, and we were obviously sticking strictly to verified facts to protect our journalists, even though sometimes it didn't work. Either way, they would sometimes be taken in for a while and then taken out. And then I'll just quickly go to, multi-stakeholder collaboration. So I think it's very important because, as I am, Tabani was talking about, the issue of ZEC, where, you don't know why you're not being accredited or what the challenge is. But I think it's very important that, we find formal channels where we actually found during the elections that the formal channels were too slow for, the speed of digital broadcasting, and hence why there was so much misinformation. And looking at the multi-stakeholder approach, where we get all, media managers partnering with ZEC to verify certain rumors, etc., etc. And, going back to what Professor Mari was saying, that we need a solid information ecosystem. And how do we create that way in advance before the actual election day? How can ZEC play that critical role? We also need tech literacy for journalists. I'm sure in this AI era that we definitely need deeper collaboration with tech hubs. And during the 2023 shadowy groups used a lot of sophisticated bots to swarm social media platforms, comments. We need stakeholders, such as Center for Human Rights. We know that we're in the process for the Southern Africa Media Summit 2026 to partner with an institution called Medan, which focuses around these issues as well, to help us develop digital self-defense for journalists as well, and look at self-defense protocols for media houses. Lastly, sharing data repositories. So collaborations definitely shouldn't start on election day. We need to have open access repositories where civil society organizations, where we have the media and the Electoral Commission uploading public interest data that will obviously, help people in advance to really understand what's happening in readable format. We partnered with the likes of Voice of America during the election period as well. Places we couldn't reach, they were as well. We had trained some citizen journalists to get stories and data as well, which played a critical role as well. The likes of ZimFact and all of that. But lastly, I think as a broadcaster, Heart and Soul is not just a conduit for news, but we're the front line of a democratic experience where people can make informed decisions for the audience that's watching and for the citizens. And the 2023 elections obviously prove that when information is withheld, or delayed, there's a vacuum which leads to harm, which leads to uncertainty, and that's definitely not what we want. So our mission for 2028, if it happens, is that we move from just information governance, but to information transparency as a practice in the media fraternity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Unique. I would like to open the floor for questions. If there is anyone who has a question to our speakers, Lloyd, Tendai, Priscilla, Unique. Unfortunately, Dr. Tabani and Prof. Mare, they've left the room, but you can just pose the questions and we'll try our best to answer. I'm going to try and unmute people so that you can be able to put your reactions.
Belinda, if there is no one from the attendees who wants to ask a question, I have a question for Unique.
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to find out, because this issue of access to the public broadcaster, I don't know how many media houses or rather television stations we have in Zimbabwe at the moment. What is the problem in terms of the issue of having alternative media? Is it that there's no one who is willing to invest in the media so that they can also provide alternative voices, or perhaps cover opposition political parties that are contesting in the elections, given the fact that there's an unequal access to the Zimbabwe Broadcasting Corporation?
Thanks, Lloyd, for that. That's a very good question. And I think, I'm sure you can tell, Heart and Soul has literally been the only alternative voice, when you're looking at opposition. I think there is definitely a fear amongst media houses. It's not that they don't have the capacity, but I definitely believe that as Heart and Soul Broadcasting Services, we have a come as you are approach. And, we'll deal with the other issues where we have to deal with, the police or the justice system after. But I think also opposition does understand. I think they do go to the likes of the ZBCs and all of that, and they are obviously denied. And when you look at our digital platforms, they might not necessarily fully trust that we have the specific impact that the national broadcaster could have. But for other media houses, I'll tell you that we did have a lot of opposition leaders approaching us saying, well, we've been denied at the national broadcaster, so can we come and share our story? And we were very happy to do that. But amongst the larger media fraternity, there is a sense of self-censorship, because you don't know what will happen after that. You might be labeled as being, conduit or, an agent for opposition. Yet, you're basically opening up the space to everyone to come and share, whatever it is, their campaigns or what it is that they stand for. So there's a sense of self-censorship, which we definitely have to deal with, because, the minute you go against what the national broadcaster is saying, you are labeled as opposition. So that's the biggest challenge we have.
Thank you, Unique. Lloyd, I hope you're answered. Anyone else who has a question? I think I've unmuted everyone, so we are free to engage. It's an open interactive session. And if you're quiet, I would assume that our speakers did a great and phenomenal job in explaining the report and covering all the questions.
I have another question, Belinda.
Pardon me?
And I have another question, and anyone can answer on the question of the voters' roll. This proposal to transfer the management of voters' roll from the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission to the Registrar General. If that happens, is it going to improve access to information around the issue of the voters' roll? And do you think that there is going to be proactive disclosure by the Registrar General when it comes to people's ability to access the voters' roll and to actually use it and have it in a user-friendly format? Thank you.
That's a good question. Priscilla?
I've been put on the spot.
Can I put you on the spot?
Okay, yeah. So we looked at, we analyzed the bill. You must have seen the chairperson yesterday talking to that issue. I think the analysis of the ZHRC is that there needs to be safeguards if the executive is then in charge of these issues and it's no longer with an independent commission. We need strong safeguards so that information is still availed as and when it's needed. So unfortunately, as the bill is for now, it doesn't provide any of those safeguards, and there's nothing pushing the Registrar General to release such information as and when it's needed. So we are hoping that if it's passed, then an act of parliament may be to provide the necessary safeguards. Thank you.
Maybe Belinda to add.
Yes, Tenda, you may.
I think the most criticism around this has been that you cannot take such important information. The voters' roll is not just a voters' roll, but it's in people's very personal, important information from an independent commission to an individual, to an office. I think in so far as issues of proactive disclosure, transparency, I think much of the reading that I've been reading around that, it shows that taking the voters' roll from Zimbabwe Electoral Commission to the office of Registrar General will plunge us into a chaos. I think previously it was managed by that office and was taken to the commission. And so far as I mean, the issue of voters' roll has been a challenge where most Zimbabwean citizens have been having issues with the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission insofar as the voters' roll is concerned, and issues of, for example, removing people who have died from the voters' roll and so forth and so forth. But there will be very much um, um, uh, it will be very harder for us to actually audit that process when it's in that particular office. And there will be chances from what citizens are raising concerns of costs voters, and I think it's going to be more challenging in so far as transparency is concerned. So I think we pray that that should not come to pass, so that the citizens keep on engaging with the commission that is responsible for managing and administration of elections.
Thank you, Tendai. I promised everyone that I was going to stick to time. It's 5 minutes past 1. We started at 10 minutes past 11, so 5 minutes to go. May I please give this platform to Ivy to give concluding remarks?
Hello, Belinda. Thank you for that. And you mentioning the time is putting me on the spot as well, that I need to keep time. Noted. I hope you can hear and see me.
Yes, we can.
Thank you. So, good afternoon now. Mine is to say thank you. So, thank each and every one of you for that. The interventions. So, it started with the stage being really set well by Prof. Admire, and then we've had really good conversations that have followed. Thank you. And now, as we come to a close, just to reflect on why this report matters briefly, is that elections still remain to be the primary way through which the public gets to engage. That's their main way of public participation. But then we have information being the driver, or being the one that gives that participation substance. So when that participation, when information is constrained or when it is distorted, then we narrow the space for the people's choice to be genuine. And now we have these guidelines, as Lloyd mentioned, that they are not borrowed, they have not been imported from anywhere. They are quite practical, are made for our context. And so they help us to move the aspirations into action, and help us to create an environment that supports credible information. So then this report now takes it forward to ask that question of how do we make it practical. And the report has taken those standards and it has tested them against the lived reality of people in Zimbabwe. And what we have seen from the presentation and from all the conversations that have followed is that the landscape is complex. There are gaps that require us to have some deeper reflection, but there is also the reminder there that strengthening this landscape is not a one-off task. So there is need for us to sustain this attention that we're giving to strengthening this information environment. But importantly, we need a lot of collaboration. So now I would just like to take a moment to acknowledge and with sincere appreciation to thank the many, many hands that have gone behind making this work. We have our partners, that's MISA Zimbabwe. We have all our speakers today, from Dr. Tabani Moyo, Tendai Baji, Priscilla Mbanga, Unique, Zimuto, colleagues from both the center, from the center, both who are with us today and those who have since moved on. Research like this takes it's teamwork. And so even when we have people who are no longer in the room, your contributions are still very much appreciated, because it's what has brought us to this day. And in a special way, to thank Professor Admire Mare, who is the one who now sat down and did the actual writing of the report, because without that labor, we would just be having ideas and good intentions, but nothing concrete to work with. So we are grateful for what he has put together. And now to all of you who are here, now this is very important. I want to acknowledge your patience and your generosity, because as you all know, we had initially planned to hold this launch in March. And the level of interest that we saw in the registrations was incredibly encouraging. But unfortunately, on the day, I know many had logged in already and were waiting to be let in. We encountered a technical issue, and that meant that we could not begin the meeting as planned. So we sincerely apologize once again for that disruption. It means a great deal that you have still joined us today and given us another opportunity to have this conversation. And importantly, is that this is not where the conversation ends. We will be continuing the discussions next week at the FIFA. Not Yes, is it FIFA, Belinda?
Grief,
I'm confusing.
grief.
Yes, these events are many. It's at Drift in Abidjan. And there we hope to engage more in this conversation on elections and access to information. So some of the issues raised here, we carry the dialogue forward. So that I do not disrupt the timekeeping that Belinda has worked so hard on. Thank you once again very much for your time and for your engagement. Let's continue to engage. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, and goodbye.